Hello, I'm Dominique Alhambra, and I'm the Collections Manager for Anthropology at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And to start, I'd first like to respectfully acknowledge that the Denver Museum of Nature and Science is on the traditional homeland of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute Nations and people. We also acknowledge that the state of Colorado includes the traditional and ancestral lands of 48 Native American tribal nations who now live in the American Southwest, the Great Plains, and the Rocky Mountain region. So today, my presentation will be on the World Ethnology Collections Move. And this was a project that we did last year from July to December of 2020. So this is Pivoting in a Pandemic. This project was funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. This was through the first stimulus package, and it was formally called NEH CARES, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. So a quick background. When the funding was made available, it was a very quick turnaround, and we basically had a few weeks to put it together. And we wrote this during the closure. So the museum was closed from March to June of last year. And some collection staff were able to get back on site during the first week of June, which was really important because we found out that we got the funding in the middle of June and the project period started on July 1st. So the NEH received over 2,300 eligible applications, and they funded 317 of them. So that was awarded to approximately 14%. So it was extremely competitive, and we're so proud that we were able to compete and receive this funding. So specifically for this grant, we wrote that we would rehouse about 3,200 objects in our World Ethnology storage area. And this included the collections from Africa, South, and Central America. And this went to partially supporting salaries for 10 staff to work on various aspects of this project. So folks like curators and database folks, some of them were just written in for just a few hours a week, but the collections folks that were really hands-on, like the conservators, photographers, and collections managers, we were on it almost full time. And although we applied for $300,000, we received half that amount, which we were still able to make go really, really far. So this is the old storage collections. I took photos at the beginning of the project, and as you can see, it's pretty crowded and cramped in there. Yeah, we have issues with some temperature fluctuations in that room, and certainly overcrowding of objects on shelves, and some not archival materials. You can see there's a lot of wooden shelving, which the wood can often give off gases that can damage the objects, and some just plain cardboard boxes that some of these objects were stored in. And you can see it's also, everything's covered in plastic, and that was because at one point in the past, our building and facilities folks had to get into the ceiling to do some work in the ceiling. So we had covered several of the shelving units with plastic. So we considered it kind of like the great unknown of the anthropology collections. We were always planning to move it last, but this opportunity with this grant just really let us, focus on it just for 6 months. We're just dedicated to this one project. The other thing we had to do was adapt the rehousing process. So in the before times, we had about 40 to 50 volunteers coming in through the course of a week, helping us build these amazing mounts, right? They're custom measured to the object. They don't use adhesives, and the foam that the objects are sunk into, you carve that custom for each object, which takes a lot of time and a lot of people labor. But with the pandemic, we were only able to have 5 staff on site, like part-time, kind of alternating so that we could maintain all the safety measures for social distancing and such. And so we really had to scale back some of those, uh, uh, our typical mount standards. And so we kept the custom box, but we decided to do a simple foam lining on the bottom of the box and just a few simple wedges to make sure if the object wobbles a little bit that we could stabilize it. So we ended up developing this 5-day rehousing cycle. And I like to say we had to go into beast mode because we really did. To accomplish as much as we did, it was just kind of, let's focus and really buckle down. And I really like this object. This object is this wooden club with a lot of nails in it. It's from the San people of Africa. And it's super gnarly looking, and I would not want to meet that in a fight at all, but it's a really awesome piece. Yes, so we had a 5-day rehousing cycle, like I said, and basically every week we would do the same thing over and over again. And what I like to tell people is that, you don't have to, do as many boxes as we did, but you can adapt your workflow with, if you're working in a museum, you can adapt the workflow with the staff that you have and the time that they have. So if you have a collection that you want to rehouse, scale it to that project, right? Figure out how many objects you have, figure out how many people are available to work on the project, and then you can figure out your cycle that way. And maybe it doesn't have to be 5 days, maybe it's 8 days or something like that. But if you have this consistent cycle, it really does help you accomplish a lot more. So typically, we would first start out by measuring the objects, entering the measurements into Excel. Then we would photograph those objects and basically sort them into the 3 regions we were working with. And then the assistant collections manager, Jeff Fagley, he would take the measurements from the Excel sheet, which auto-calculates the size of the board to assemble the box, and he would cut them all out. And then, of course, you would have to assemble all of the boxes. And I assembled boxes, our conservator, KATHRYN, assembled boxes, and we also had help from our teen science scholars last summer who helped with this. And finally, you have to put the objects with the boxes. And on our work from home days, we're also editing all those photos we took and uploading them into the database. And then finally, with the help of our fantastic curators, Dr. MICHELE KOONS and Dr. ERIN BAXTER, they took the objects from those racks and put them away into the shelves and cabinets in our preservation area. So we took that process and we repeated it 22 times, which is amazing. So even though we received half of the funding that we requested, we were still able to rehouse over 82% over the 29 weeks that we worked on this project. And then finally, we wanted to finish the other 20-ish%. So we continued that into the first quarter of 2021. And in the end, we moved over 3,300 objects, and we did finish by our target of the first quarter in March. So we had other staff, as you saw, who were working on other aspects of this grant. Our conservator, KATHRYN REUSCH, worked on some basic condition assessments and needs for conservation, as well as stabilization for some objects. So when I was measuring objects, I would often flag if something was broken or had damage, and then KATHRYN was able to look that up in the database and then identify the ones that needed the most work. And then we brought them to her in her lab for her to do her conservation work. Our awesome photographer extraordinaire, Rick WICKER, is amazing at giving objects personality, and just making them look alive. And so he took formal studio photos and publication quality photos, which we featured on social media, we included in articles and in presentations like these. And the curators determined, what were the most important objects to them, or most significant, I would say. And then we also rotated objects through his lab. So in that whole process you saw, we're also working with Rick and KATHRYN and sending objects back and forth. And then of course, there's the data cleanup. We cleaned up the names of some of the culture groups. Some of the names in the database we weren't using, so we took them out. Other ones, they were outdated or are now considered inappropriate. So we updated those to what the people prefer to call themselves instead of what anthropologists and Western scientists called them in the past. And of course, we're updating the catalog records as we go. And finally, collections research from our curators and staff. So like I said, they identified the significant pieces in the collection and they added descriptive information to the catalog records and wrote a few articles for Sapiens, which is an online news magazine related to all things people and anthropology. And it turned out when we aggregated all the data, that there were over 150,000 total social media engagements across all of our platforms with the content specifically from this project. And the other thing, Dr. ERIN Baxter has this really cool project going on with the shrunken heads from South America. So we have 6, and some of them may be real and some of them may be fake, and she's working on a way to analyze how to figure out if they're real or fake. It's not just based on looks. So that's a really cool project. The objects you see here are called Ere Ibeji, and they're from the Yoruba people of Nigeria. So they represent twins because the Yoruba people have a high rate of multiple births. And so Dr. Steve Nash, who is a twin himself, was really taken with these items. And he wrote a whole article on Sapiens about, twins and what it means to him to be a twin. So that was really cool. So here are some before and after photos. I always like to, those commercials that say like, make the stuff disappear. Well, we didn't make them disappear, but we did take them from, just okay to amazing. So here are some before and after photos. So like I said, it's super crowded, covered in plastic. And then voila, it's gone, it's emptied. So I really like this. That was a really crowded shelf there with the Guatemalan masks. That took a couple of weeks to get through. And then of course, we needed some working area in there. So we took down some shelves to give us a little bit more room to maneuver. So there we go. And then you might be wondering, all right, well, where did they go? If you haven't been here, here is the Avenir Collections Center. And we opened it in 2013 and have been moving collections down ever since. And this is where they are now. Here's the African section of storage and the items in their little boxes in the cabinets. So they're a lot happier. So some takeaways and lessons. I really think this was a unique opportunity for our staff to focus on a single project. And what I also really liked about it is that we developed the process organically. We work with people's strengths, and it was all about being flexible. And then of course, future directions. There's the collections that we found that, the objects didn't have a catalog number, so we got to figure that out. And then of course, completing the mounts with like the full foam cavity and the full labeling. And then of course, you might be wondering, well, what are we going to be doing in that room now that it's empty? And we wrote a couple more grants, and we're hoping to use it as a workspace to process some archaeological collections from New Mexico and Eastern Colorado. So this was truly a team effort. And thank you to all of the staff that I've worked with. Thank you to the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you to our grant officer, Jill Buwig. And this was really an amazing team effort. And I'm so proud and grateful for the people I work with. So thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Memory Williams. I'm here with Dominique and popping in like I always do to read your questions to our presenter. So feel free to just go ahead and start dropping those questions in our comments. I'm monitoring Facebook and YouTube. So whichever way you're watching, I'll be there. I see we have one comment from Bridget who says, great job. Truly, this was just such a huge feat. So it's really great to have this story being told. While we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, I'll ask the question, Dominique, from this awesome presentation. So what, while you were going through all of these specimens and these pieces, did you find anything that just really, I saw you put a few things in your presentation, but anything that just really stuck out to you or something that you weren't aware that you hadn't seen before, but saw while we were making our big move that really stuck out to you, anything like that?
Yeah, totally. There were lots of really interesting items, but I would say one item that I really, really liked, they're called Kissi pennies, and it's KISSI. And they're these long, narrow, almost wires with flat ends, and they were used in Africa as a form of currency before Western colonizers came through, and they ended up being really popular with art collectors, and they're not used anymore. But what's really interesting about them is that they were considered to kind of be alive. So the person who hammered them out had to give them life before they could go into circulation and to be used as actual currency. And if they didn't do that process, that it wasn't considered real currency. So I thought that was really interesting.
Interesting. And I am just searching just to make sure I am not missing any questions. And if you're watching this later on, feel free to drop your questions as you're watching it, and we will answer those as well. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything. I've always heard so much about this grant and how much we were able to do with the funds we received from this grant. Could you expound just a little bit more on your successes and failures and what you learned from this? Because you were, of course, a big part of this too.
Yeah, I would say, I think I mentioned in the presentation that it really was about working to people's strengths. And as you know, as smooth and as lovely as that presentation is, like, it was a little bit of a rough start as we tried to figure out, like, you know, who should work on what. Mm-hmm. In the end, you know, it was what I learned about, what I learned from this project that I haven't done at DMNS since I've been here, is that, like, our team in anthropology and collections, like, we really pulled together to do this grant. Mm-hmm. And do the work of this grant. And yeah, it was just like so great and so motivating to see that. So that some of the days when I'm like, I have to build boxes for 8 hours today. And yeah. Like, God, you know, I did it for the rest of the team, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And definitely, I also developed like a lot of calluses on my fingers.
Yeah, a lot of technical, tactile work. Yes.
Yep.
Definitely. Okay, well, how about we go ahead and just wrap it up? We're coming up on time. I'm not seeing any questions, but feel free to drop them later. I'll ask now one more. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with? I always like to ask presenters for just a little knowledge nugget, just a quick little fact that we can share with our friends as we go into the weekend, just to make us look like we're super cool and super smart. Is there any just a fast fact that you can share from this presentation that we can take with us?
I think a quick fact from this project, we ended up using a lot of sheets of Blueboard, which is the archival cardboard that you see the boxes were made.
Yeah.
And we sat there and we tallied up every single thing, and it ended up being, over 350 sheets, and they're about $20 a sheet. So it's a big investment.
Yeah.
But that's what's so great is that, DMNS really does invest in its collections that we steward as.
Yeah.
And, it's so great to have that commitment. And, the next time that we're able to open up the downstairs area for the public, you should come check it out.
Yes, hopefully soon. Yes. It looks amazing. Yes. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Dominique, for this presentation today. And thank you all for watching. Like always, we'll be right back here next Thursday at 12 o'clock for another episode of Science Division Live. Have a good one. See you next week.
Thank you.